Food is more than just what's on our plate. It's the places where it's grown, it's the people who grow it, and so much more. Join me, Janice Person, your host, on Grounded by the Farm every other week as we talk about the foods we love. This week, we're going to be talking beef with a friend of mine, Marybeth Feutz in Indiana. I decided I would do this one a little bit differently, and I would have my nieces and nephews, at least some of them, ask me various questions about beef because I've had experience of going out on a lot of these kind of operations before. I wanted to make sure that I answered the questions that people who've never had that opportunity really have going on in their minds. And my nieces and nephews love food. So I gave them this opportunity and they decided they were going to make this so awkward for me. And they gave me some of the craziest questions, but really they just worded them in crazy ways. They're not really crazy questions. They just did them in ways that would make it awkward for me to ask them. So you're going to hear me really set Marybeth to a moment of absolute silence. I don't think I've ever seen her do that. All of that said, the most awkward part of this whole thing is that somehow we had technical issues halfway through our conversation. Didn't catch them until I was editing this episode. Spent hours trying to figure out how to make something work. Ultimately, we decided we'll make this a part 1 and a part 2. And we will hear the rest of the Marybeth interview in a couple of weeks when I'm able to get that redone. But for now, we've got half episode. And we're going to be talking about steaks. We're going to be talking about how to pick them, how to cook them, all those kind of things. Same with burgers. Since she's a vet, she's going to explain some of the differences in cows and why nutrition matters and what that does for dairy versus beef and some of those kind of pieces. Talk about her favorite underappreciated cuts and information from her vet side about what's wasted and the rumen in the stomach. And at the very end, you will hear just a glimpse of her son, Joseph. So make sure you stay through to the end. He's 6 years old and so excited about being on a podcast. Thank you. Here's Marybeth.
So I'm Marybeth Feutz. I actually grew up in New Jersey and came to Indiana through New England. Met my current husband at Purdue, and he convinced me that I liked him enough that I should stay in Indiana. So here we are. So I went from the suburbs of New York City, essentially, to smack dab in the middle of 50 acres.
Okay, I need to know which burb because I lived in White Plains, New York for a long time, and friends were in Hoboken, and we knew everything based on the exits.
Yeah, so I was actually nowhere near the exits. I grew up in a little town called West Milford, which was pretty close to Wayne. Yeah, so up in the northeast corner.
Oh my gosh, I have friends from Pompton Lakes.
Oh my gosh, that's so crazy. That's nuts. I love it.
It is a little bit crazy, right? But it's a small world. So
Absolutely.
Anyway, this episode is going to be a little bit different than some of the others in the past because I've had a chance to go out and see so many beef operations over time. I'm a city girl, so I can remember the questions I asked the first time. The first time I learned about beef, though, was actually at a livestock show because I took vacation time and went to Louisville for a show.
Oh, wow.
Because there were so many questions around beef going around, and my job was really about crops. So I had to learn something, and that was one way I thought I could invite myself into people's farm without saying, I want to come stay at your house. So now I'm at your house. I'm obviously bolder. I'm going to start with the first question I got from my nieces and nephews. So I have a crowd of mostly city kids, never lived on farms, occasionally may have gone out for a harvest or some short visit on the farm for an hour or two.
Okay.
First question when I said I'm going to talk to somebody who grows beef is, what brand of ketchup do you recommend with your well-done steak? Dramatic pause.
So first, anything cooked past medium is not worth eating.
Your face is contorting.
Am I totally red?
Ketchup and well done.
Well done. I can't even. I feel like I'm beet red. The way that your steak should look. Okay. So
So now seriously.
No, but seriously.
How do you eat a steak, and what do you recommend for a steak?
Yes. So I prefer my steaks to be cooked rare to medium rare. It depends a little bit on who's manning the grill, me or my husband. And if we're going out, the restaurants have a little different definition of that than I do. So listen to your servers when they tell you cool red center, warm red center, kind of know what you're looking for, because they don't. Rare at one place will be medium rare, at another place will be medium somewhere else. So talk to your servers at a restaurant. But for me, I like the cool red center. My husband says knock the horns off and walk it past a fire and put it on my plate. So he likes it really rare.
Yeah.
But
my dad liked it that rare.
Yeah. But the more you cook it, the more liquid it loses and the more fat it loses during cooking. So it loses a lot more flavor and moisture and becomes this really dry, chewy, not fun thing to eat. And most people that I've talked to that say they don't like steak or they don't like beef, it's because they've only ever had it cooked to death with not a lot of flavor left. I don't put ketchup on my steak. I will sometimes use A1. But we sort of joke at the restaurants that if you cook it right and it's a good piece of meat, it really shouldn't need a whole lot.
I was in a restaurant a million years ago when I was in college in Oklahoma, and we sat down, ordered steaks, and one of the people at the table said, "Can you bring me Heinz 57 or whatever, A1?" Mm-hmm. And the waitress looked at us like, "Oh my God, not those people." And the chef actually came out and said, "I'll be glad to get it for you once you eat my steak and you say it needs it." Mm-hmm. And it was a really good cut of meat, and it was really well prepared, and nothing was needed. And so the point was made. But but yeah, my nephew knew that this is...
He knew my face would do that thing.
Yeah, he did. He actually even went so far as to say maybe they have a homemade ketchup recipe or something. But do you guys put salt or pepper? Or?
Yeah, so I'll usually do salt and pepper. Sometimes I'll do like a lemon pepper seasoning, or whatever I'm feeling. But in the salt pepper family, like those pre-made steak seasonings or the rubs, those are pretty good too. Shake them on, let them sit for 5 or 10 minutes before you put it on the grill or on the cast iron or however you prefer to cook your steak.
Okay.
I got into a couple summers ago using compound butter, and whether you buy that or make it yourself, just a tablespoon of compound butter, which is butter with salt and herbs and pepper and whatever else you want to put in it. Grill your steak and slap a tablespoon of compound butter on it. I remember when
Land O'Lakes sold some. I don't know if they still do, but I don't know. I can certainly buy it in my grocery store, different compound butters, and I do.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah. That's really, really good
yummy.
On a nicely
cooked
All right,
steak. So now in my family, we have combinations of people who've gone to culinary school. One worked as a butcher for a while. Okay. And then we have people that just like beef. Mm-hmm. So how would you tell people to buy steaks at the grocery store if they don't know a lot? Because obviously the butcher and the one chef trained,
they know what they're doing.
They kind of know what they're doing, or they at least have made us think they do.
Yes. So if you're looking for like your summer out on the grill, have a good steak kind of meal, go for something like a ribeye, a T-bone, or even a filet. The filet is going to be a little pricier, but it is. And if I hear that you're cooking a well done filet, I'm gonna come through this microphone. Filet really needs to be like medium rare, but they tend to be a thicker cut, so it's a little hard to do. So if you're an inexperienced steak griller and you just want something for the family for the weekend, get a ribeye or a T-bone. I prefer a bone-in steak, but boneless is perfectly fine too.
Cut.
Yeah, yep. But a boneless is perfectly fine too. Look for an even coloring. They should be a nice red color throughout. You want a little bit of fat marbling in the meat and a little bit of a fat kind of rim around the edge of it too. That some of that fat's going to cook out while you cook it. The heat will sort of render it and melt it, and it'll fall through the grill. But it will give it a lot more flavor and a lot more moisture than a really, really lean piece of meat.
Okay. So you just covered so many of those questions all at once.
I'm so glad.
It was kind of crazy that you did so well. Now, one question on burgers. Like, do you also cook those pink? Because Josh knows in his restaurants and stuff, a lot of them still have guidance that explain different things about ground beef. So how are we cooking burgers?
So I cook burgers medium, which is in a burger world. I cook mine that I want them either just a tiny hit of pink or completely evenly colored, kind of brown throughout. I keep a cheat magnet on my refrigerator with what's the target temperature. And I believe for ground beef, it's 165 degrees in the middle, Fahrenheit. And if you want me, I'll go check the magnet to make sure I'm telling you that right number.
No, you're good.
So if you're unsure or if you're cooking for a crowd, grab that meat thermometer and stick it in the middle.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for ground beef, you do want that USDA food safety guidelines say 165 degrees. And that's why you'll see that little asterisk in the menus at the restaurant that say cooking undercooked meat could cause whatever the blanket statement is.
Yeah. All right. So one question for you. We went out and saw your cows.
Yes.
Right. You have beautiful Angus black cows. And they were a little backlit for a minute. So some of the pictures, hard to get their faces, but then I got it. But so explain the differences in kinds of cows and really why wouldn't they want to eat? The question I was given is why wouldn't I want to eat meat from a dairy cow? Why wouldn't I want to eat meat from a dairy cow? Or just explain the differences in cows.
Sure. So cows are cows, like dogs are dogs. Okay, but we've got different breeds in there. Okay,
yeah, you have labs and you have poodles.
Right, exactly, and you've got chihuahuas and greyhounds. Okay, so in the cow world, our beef cows are kind of like our labs, big, stocky, just go out and have a good time, and our dairy cows, I would kind of equate them more to a greyhound. They're kind of long, they're kind of lean, and they have a very specific job to do. And the dairy cow's very specific job is to make milk, and they are excellent at making milk. Because they're so good at that, we really need to monitor their nutrition really carefully. Because for any breastfeeding mom, you know that it takes a lot of calories to make milk. So they need to eat a whole lot of food, a very specific ratio of their calories and their protein and everything else that goes into that.
And so, like, do you as a vet help people understand what rations ought to look like? Or?
Absolutely. That can be part of our job. A lot of the larger dairies will have a specific dairy nutritionist who works with them even more closely than what we can do.
Yeah.
But the dairy cow puts most of her energy into making a calf and then making milk. So she doesn't put on a whole lot of muscle mass. And that's what our steaks are. That's what our meat is. It's the muscle mass. Now, the beef cow has a very specific job to do. And her job is to make a calf and make meat.
Yeah.
So she is really, really good at taking whatever we feed her and turning that into really great muscle mass. Beef cows absolutely can make milk, but they usually just make enough to raise the calf that they have that year. They don't overproduce like a dairy cow does. So that's kind of the differences between a dairy and a beef cow. Does that make sense?
But in a lot of places, we eat dairy steers or something, right? So that goes into the beef chain in some places,
yes,
right?
Yes, it does. Yes. So a boy cattle can't make milk, right?
I used to say boy cow,
right,
and it would make people's heads explode. But
yes, it rolls off the tongue really easy.
Cows,
but
cows are moms.
Yes.
Heifers are like girls who haven't had any calves.
Correct.
And then steers are the boys
after
that you're going to eat.
They've been castrated.
Yes.
Yes. So
they could have been a bull.
Could have been a bull, but are missing the pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the dairy world, you want to have girl babies because you want to be able to grow your herd or replace an older one who needs to leave the herd. So you want to have girls. So the boy dairy calves will go somewhere else. They'll leave the dairy farm and they'll go to a beef farm and be raised as beef cattle.
Right.
They look different. They're a different color. They're a different body type. They're tall and skinny instead of short and stocky. So they stand out.
Yeah.
And they will put on muscle mass. Typically, that meat from a dairy steer will often be used more for ground meat because it's not the same It doesn't get the same marbling of
Yeah.
fat that a beef steer would give you. It doesn't have the same volume, so you're not going to have a nice big thick juicy ribeye come off a dairy steer that you would off a beef steer.
Okay.
So yes, we still eat it. It still tastes delicious. We just eat it in a little different form.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna chug along here because they gave me so many questions. When you think about the various cuts of meat, what are the parts that might be underappreciated, or at least underappreciated in common U.S. culture, but maybe are delicacies or really appreciated other places? Or what does that look like?
The short rib. Short rib is my favorite, hands down, my absolute favorite cut of beef.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. It's from the ribs.
Yeah.
It's from way down low on the chest. And
where the ribs get short?
Where the ribs get short, so to speak. Yeah. So it's from way down there. Those need to be braised. That's not a grilling cut. That's a stick it in your crock pot with some broth and whatever else you want to put in there. Put the lid on and forget about it all day long. They get so tender, and my face is making very different expressions now than it was when we talked about well done with ketchup.
You look happier now.
But they just fall off the bone tender. It's a fattier cut, and it's a tougher cut to start with, which is why you have to cook it all day long, because it cooks out that connective tissue and gets it all softened up. And it's like butter when you do it right. I
can tell you're seriously.
That's my favorite.
Now I'm wanting short ribs because it's going to be dinner time eventually. Golly darn.
Yep.
All right. So how much of the cow is wasted in the process? And when you talk about slaughtering a cow or a steer, what's that use ratio, or kind of what are we doing there? Because a lot of us only know like the big cuts of meat.
So we talk about live weight and we talk about rail weight. And the live weight is when you walk the animal off the truck and onto the scale, what does she weigh? And then the rail weight is once you've done the butchering and removed like the rumen, which is really heavy, what you're left with. Which is the
stomach.
That's part of the stomach. Yep. So what you're left with in terms of meat and bones is the rail weight. And I think you lose about 40% of the weight of the cow just in her gastrointestinal tract. In the length of her intestines and the size of her stomach and all of the stuff that's in her stomach. Yeah.
So, we take some organs as organ meat and stuff like that. So that wouldn't necessarily be lost. But some of the other stuff that people really can't eat.
Right. Yep. And there's really not much of it. So, so about 60% of the live weight turns into is meat and bone. And then there's probably another 10 to 15% that's organ meats. We can use the intestines, we do lots of things with that. The skin obviously can be turned into leather. There's lots. So I would say conservatively 20% of the weight of an animal is not used. And it's probably even less than that.
I hope you've enjoyed this part of the interview with Marybeth. We will be back and we'll be talking about a variety of other things that are on my niece and nephew's minds, including some of the environmental footprint pieces, more on some of the food selections that are made, as well as some more things around animal care. And I especially want to talk a little bit about Michelle. This is pretty hard on me. I committed to get these things out early on Wednesdays. Was really hit hard with some technical issues. So hate missing my deadlines that I had set for me. Hate having to divide it into two, but still learning a lot. So I'm going to take this as a lesson. Hope it was still really worth your time and effort to be here. Would appreciate any support you can offer, whether that is hitting the subscribe button if you haven't already, leaving a rating, telling friends to check it out, checking out the website. We have new stuff up on the blog, not only the video of Marybeth and some of the cattle that she has, but we also had a post about hay. Would love to have your help on that. And here, without any further ado, is Joseph.
Thank you, and goodbye!